I hate to tell you this, but one of your heroes, one of your people that whose games that you appreciate, that you love more than anything in this world, was arrested this week. I know. I had to console you when you found out about this, and
Well, not really. Mostly because Yuji Naka is a really, really huge asshole.
oh
Just
yeah,
it's been noted in like multiple interviews through throughout a lot of Japanese video game news rags and press that yeah, he is an extremely rude and arrogant guy. He is
wow.
not pleasant to be around.
And this is the guy that made Sonic. That's not really something you should be arrogant about. But anyway, basically what we're talking about, Yuji Naka was arrested this past weekend, I believe, for insider trading in Japan. The story goes that him and two other employees from Square Enix bought stock in a company called Aiming, and they bought a lot of stock before the announcement that it was developing a Dragon Quest game for mobile, which then shot the stock up immediately after the purchase was made. After the announcement was made that Aiming was making, I think it was Dragon Quest Tact, I think was the game. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And this is an interesting story because this pretty much caps off, I'd say, a 3-year disastrous tenure with Square Enix, where his last game was Balan Wonderworld, which he then eventually sued Square Enix over, I think due to reputational damage, where he says he was taken off the project 6 months before release. Zero, what are your thoughts of Yuji Naka getting arrested for insider trading?
So, to kind of clear up the timeline, Yuji Naka and his two cohorts who went in on this whole stock scheme, they had bought the stock back in January of 2021, I believe. And this was when they had gotten internal information in Square saying, hey, we're going to be working with Aiming to make Dragon Quest Tact. And that was when they had made the purchase, when they had gotten that sort of insider information within the company. And then, where things really get interesting, is Dragon Quest Tact ends up doing a worldwide release um, in in that same year in July. So literally 6 months later. So what I'm assuming had happened, at least according to what I can roughly translate from some of the Japanese newspapers, was he purchased about 20,000 US dollars in stock for Aiming back in January, and then 6 months later, after Dragon Quest Tact comes out and it ends up doing, just the initial millions of downloads and everything, just Aiming ends up posting on Japanese news, hey, by the way, just our new title Dragon Quest Tact came out and it topped the most downloaded games on mobile phones as of this current weekend or whatever. Oh, never mind, I got the year wrong. So it was actually 2020, not 2021. But yeah, so 6 months later, game comes out. He likely sells, and the price for his proceeds had increased to about 64,000 US dollars. So before any Japanese capital gains taxes and stuff like that, he probably got right around 44,000 US dollars off of that stock sale. And I think just because someone decided to squeal, that's mainly the reason he got caught. And same for his cohorts who participated in this whole insider trading scheme.
Yeah, that is weird that he got popped for this because the amount of which that he gained is not something, maybe not in America, but is not something that would really draw any criticism, really, because usually the ones that get popped for insider trading do it in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, whereas, like you said, it was from 20,000 to 64,000.
Yeah.
So the fact that he got popped for this, to me, was like, really? That's the amount? That's what they're popping him? Okay.
Yeah.
So basically the story is that I guess one of the three told somebody, and that person told the regulators essentially what was going on. Is that what was happening on this?
At least that's what I can discern. Details are a bit scant on this. It's just been mostly focused on, oh my god, a former prominent game producer Yuji Naka arrested for insider trading. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunately kind of like sensationalized on the fact that it was Yuji Naka that was caught. So my assumption and my speculation is that either one of his co-conspirators or one of the co-conspirators knew, told regulators, and we're just like, yo, these guys did some really sharky insider trading way back in 2020, and that's the reason that this has become big news.
I wonder if one of those co-conspirators have been doing it longer and have more of a track record, and he just got roped in.
Yeah, that's a potential scenario too.
It's like, again, I don't know Japanese law and how they enforce this, but for the amount that he is getting popped for, just seems odd to me that he got roped into it, and two, that he got arrested for this, because literally, like, there are people who have this information, but they know not to go overboard with it because that gets the ire of the regulators. So they do it for, I don't have an exact amount. They do it for a sizable but small amount, and then they have other people that they know also invest, but try to do it in a way that they can't be connected to each other to a certain extent. Like, that's usually what happens in these situations, and usually for a lot more money. So it is the reputation of Yuji Naka the reason why he probably got popped too. If it were like, let's do an example. Let's say Shigeru Miyamoto does this. Does Shiggy end up getting popped, or is this mainly because someone had an axe to grind?
Yeah, that is really hard to say. I've been trying to kind of source more information on this, and unfortunately, Japanese media is just kind of sensationalizing the fact that it's Yuji Naka that's been caught up in all this. So, unfortunately, until this actually shakes out in Japanese court, we may not find any truly substantial details. So, I guess I'll just have to keep track of this story if any further articles come up on Japanese news. But yeah, just who's to say?
Yeah. Now, do we know what the penalties are for this? Because I know that he's probably going to have to forfeit the gains that he made, and he'll probably have to pay a fine. But is jail time involved in this?
I am not 100% sure on the Japanese laws on this, but if their laws are very similar to how laws are in the US, I imagine, yeah, just forfeiting the capital gains is likely going to be the first thing.
Yeah.
And second thing, definitely a fine.
Yeah, no, definitely. Those are usually standard, that you have to forfeit the earnings and then you have to pay a fine. But again, the people who get popped for this do it in the millions. They do it in like much bigger amounts, which is why I'm curious to what happens to Yuji Naka after this. Because then if he goes to jail, I often wonder if there's something else involved in this, or maybe just Japan is that much more strict about it, which could be the case too. But when I read this and I started reading up on it, I was like, the first thing that caught me was they popped him for that little. Like, wow. And it makes sense that he got popped because somebody squealed. Because I don't think a regulator would look at that and think something is amiss. I think to a certain extent, maybe somebody was saying like, oh, invest in my company, please. And yeah, sure, why not? And that's what happened. Other than that, I don't see what other things could have prompted them to say, we need to look into this. So, yeah.
Yeah, especially from the fact that when he and his co-conspirators bought the stock back in January 2020, just the information that they had was non-public, so it wasn't like a news article came out saying, "Hi, so Aiming is going to be the developers behind the new Dragon Quest mobile game that we're developing called Dragon Quest Tact."
Right.
So yeah, just and I think that's why it just went kind of unseen by regulators because it was just kind of a, oh, neat, someone's buying stock in this mobile company, neat, whatever, and
Yeah.
then just him selling right on the day that they announced, hey, Dragon Quest Tact is now available. By the way, it's a game that we co-developed with the help of a mobile gaming company called Aiming in Japan. And then just when he liquidated the stuff, it was just kind of a, oh, neat. Looks like he bought the stock at the right time and decided to sell because the company's doing great.
Yeah. Which that in itself can be construed as shady, or it can just be a good deal on their end, because that really is the best time to sell when the stock is highest. So there is that on. But I am curious as to what this will lead to and what will happen with Yuji Naka after this, or if we're going to hear anything else on this as well, because something tells me this story is going to die, and we don't hear about this, or we don't even hear from Yuji Naka anymore. And that's the other question I have with this. Is this essentially the end of Yuji Naka?
Likely so. I mean, he hasn't been involved with the Sonic stuff for years, ever since he sort of left Sega and everything, because apparently he had his own grievances with Sega. But some folks on Sega had said that he just became as toxic as plutonium to work with. So just they were just like, okay, well, you've got two choices. Either you can take a demotion where you're doing really shitty work, or you can voluntarily resign and get the fuck out of here. I'm presuming that just with his sort of toxic reputation, I'm presuming he just went, okay, well, fuck you guys, I'm getting the fuck out of here. And that's why he's sort of been kind of independently contracting himself to whoever. And Balan Wonderworld was the one thing he was just like, yeah, just maybe this is what I can do to put my reputation back in the green and, just get everything all great and perfect. Well, since that sort of dropped off a rock and everything, he's generally been kind of quiet and everything for the most part. I think he had some comments on like one of the 3D Sonic games in the past after he had left, and he was like, yeah, I just don't like the direction the Sonic games are going. So
Yeah.
just after that, he hasn't really said much on the Sonic games or just anything. He just kind of keeps to himself. So yeah, maybe this is just something that'll just cause him to keep himself quiet and just go, okay, well, just had a shitty game. I've now been prosecuted of a crime. Maybe I should just shut the fuck up and just not put any more undue attention on me.
All right, so you think this in itself is not going to tank his career? It's his reputation is pretty much it is basically what makes him unhireable at this point.
Yeah,
Okay.
both between Balan Wonderworld being an absolute failure, and then just the fact that he is just completely toxic to work with.
Okay. Well, I have to agree, because I don't see, if this was the only issue, I would see companies staying away from him for about a year and then coming back to him as like a consultant to a certain extent, if that was to happen. But if he has reputational issues, then yeah, at that point, I think you're right. He's done, and he's probably going to ride off in the sunset and just do whatever else that he wants to do at that point. Thank you for listening to this podcast segment. The Capital Games podcast is done every week, and we post it on all your favorite podcast apps, as well as segments on YouTube. If you want to listen to another segment, you can listen to a new one right there on the screen. We also do a movie podcast called the Capital Games Movie Club. If you'd like, you can go ahead and click on that and see all the movies that we have reviewed from that point. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.